Story number 1. The Frostbound Manor. I've always been fascinated by the allure of old houses, the secrets they hold within their aging walls, and the stories whispered by their creaking floors. So, when my family decided to move to the Swedish countryside in the winter of 1987, I was excited. We found a quaint, picturesque house nestled among snow-covered pines, a place that seemed to belong in a fairy tale. Little did I know, this house, known to the locals as Frostbound Manor, would become the setting of our darkest nightmare. The Frostbound Manor stood proudly on the outskirts of a small village in northern Sweden. Its stone facade was adorned with intricate carvings, and the roof was perpetually blanketed in a thick layer of ice. No matter the season, the villagers often avoided the house, sharing hushed tales of its cursed past and the tragic demise of its last owner, a wealthy widow named Ingrid Larsson. They called it the Frozen Castle because it remained encased in ice, even during the brief Swedish summers. When my wife, Anna, and our 2 children, Eric and Lena, decided to relocate for a fresh start, Frostbound Manor seemed like the perfect choice. The price was right, and the charm of the old house was undeniable. Ignoring the villagers' warnings as mere superstition, we settled into our new home, eager to create our own memories. The first few weeks were blissful. We enjoyed the serene beauty of the snowy landscape, the children reveling in the endless playground of ice and snow. However, it didn't take long for strange occurrences to disrupt our peace. It began subtly. Objects moved slightly out of place, the sound of footsteps echoing through empty rooms, and an ever-present chill that seemed to seep into our bones. Despite the heating system working overtime, Anna dismissed these incidents as the house settling or the children's overactive imaginations. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. Late one night, as I sat in the study reading, I heard a faint whispering sound, like soft laughter carried by the wind. I glanced around, finding nothing out of the ordinary, but the unease lingered. One particularly cold evening, as a fierce snowstorm raged outside, Anna called me from the living room. Her voice trembled as she recounted seeing a ghostly figure, a woman with long, white hair standing by the large bay window. She described how the apparition seemed to be watching us, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. My heart raced as I rushed to her side. But there was no one there, only the howling wind and the swirling snow outside the window. Determined to uncover the truth, I began researching the history of Frostbound Manor. I discovered that Ingrid Larsson, the previous owner, was a reclusive widow who had inherited the house from her wealthy parents. She was known for her extravagant parties and her mysterious disappearance one winter night. The villagers believed she had been murdered by a jealous suitor, her spirit forever trapped within the icy confines of the manor. The more I delved into Ingrid's story, the more I felt a connection to her tragic fate. It was as if her sorrow was woven into the very fabric of the house, binding her spirit to the place she once called home. Determined to put an end to the haunting, I sought out the oldest resident of the village, an elderly woman named Elsa, who claimed to know the secrets of Frostbound Manor. Elsa lived in a modest cottage near the edge of the village, her life marked by the passing of many winters. When I approached her, she welcomed me with a knowing look, her eyes reflecting the wisdom of years spent in the shadow of Frostbound Manor. "Ingrid's spirit is restless," she began, her voice soft yet firm. "She was betrayed and left to suffer in her frozen prison. To free her, you must understand her pain and offer forgiveness for the wrongs that bound her here." Armed with this knowledge, I returned home with a renewed sense of purpose. I spent days searching for any clues that might help us communicate with Ingrid's spirit. One night, as the snowstorm intensified, I decided to confront the apparition directly. I gathered candles and essential oils, creating a small altar in the living room, hoping to create a peaceful environment for dialogue. As midnight approached, the temperature in the house plummeted, and the candles flickered ominously. The air grew thick with tension, and the once faint whispers turned into mournful cries. The ghostly figure of Ingrid appeared, her form shimmering in the candlelight, her eyes pleading for understanding. "Ingrid," I called out gently, my voice quivering with a mix of fear and compassion. "I'm sorry for what happened to you. We didn't know how to help." Her spectral eyes bore into mine, and I felt a surge of sorrow wash over me. "They took everything from me," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the howling wind. "My home, my life, my peace." Tears welled up in my eyes as I reached out, though my hand passed through her incorporeal form. "Please, let us help you find peace. We want to honor your memory and release you from this eternal winter." Ingrid's form began to waver, the icy energy that surrounded her dissipating as the warmth of understanding and forgiveness took hold. "Find the truth," she implored, her voice fading. "Clear my name, and let the snow melt from this cursed place." Determined to fulfill Ingrid's last wish, I continued my investigation with renewed vigor. I uncovered old letters and documents hidden in the attic, revealing the true story behind her disappearance. Ingrid had been falsely accused of infidelity and faced immense pressure from the villagers to leave her home. Her suitor had orchestrated her disappearance, framing her for a crime she didn't commit. With this newfound evidence, I approached the local authorities, presenting the truth behind Ingrid's tragic fate. The village was stunned, their long-held beliefs shattered by the revelation of the real culprit. The spirit of Ingrid was finally given the justice she deserved, her sorrow transforming into peace as the curse on Frostbound Manor began to lift. As spring approached, the perpetual ice that had cloaked the manor began to thaw, revealing the beauty of the countryside once more. The haunting footsteps and eerie laughter faded into memory, replaced by the gentle sounds of life returning to the house. Ingrid's spirit was finally at rest, her story a poignant reminder of the importance of truth and compassion. Years have passed since that winter of 1987, and Frostbound Manor stands as a testament to resilience and redemption. My family and I have moved on, but the lessons we learned during our time there remain etched in our hearts. The house, once a symbol of eternal winter and sorrow, now thrives with warmth and life, its history honored and remembered. Sometimes, when the wind rustles through the trees and the snow begins to fall, I catch a glimpse of a white-haired woman walking gracefully across the yard, her presence a gentle reminder of Ingrid's enduring spirit. The Frostbound Manor is no longer a place of fear, but a beacon of hope, where the past is acknowledged, and the future is embraced with open hearts. Story number 2. Ghosts on the Frozen Lake. I've always been drawn to the untouched wilderness, where nature reigns supreme and legends linger like the mist over a morning lake. Growing up in Finland, the tales of our land's dark history were as common as the snowfall, but none haunted me quite like the story of the cursed lake near my hometown. It was a winter's night in 1963 when my group of friends and I decided to test the legends ourselves, unaware that we were about to become part of one. Our group consisted of 5 friends: myself, Mika, Anna, Yuka, and Tuka. We were inseparable, bound by a love for adventure and a shared skepticism of the old wives' tales our grandparents recounted. The lake in question, Lake Lumi, was infamous among locals. They spoke of a massacre that had occurred centuries ago, where a group of villagers had perished under mysterious circumstances during a brutal winter. Some said it was the wrath of a wronged spirit. Others whispered about darker forces at play. Despite the warnings, our curiosity got the better of us. It was mid-January, and the cold was relentless. The sky was a perpetual gray, and the wind howled through the trees like a chorus of lost souls. We decided to go ice skating under the cover of night, thinking the darkness would add thrill to our escapade. Mika, the most daring of us, led the way, his laughter cutting through the eerie silence as we glided across the glassy surface. The first few hours were exhilarating. The ice was solid, and the lake shimmered under the pale moonlight. We skated in circles, racing each other and sharing stories to pass the time. But as midnight approached, An unsettling feeling settled over us. The temperature seemed to drop further, and the wind's howl grew louder, more insistent. Maybe we should head back, Anna suggested, her voice trembling slightly. Her unease was palpable, and I could see Mika hesitating, his bravado waning in the face of the mounting tension. Before we could decide, a piercing scream shattered the night. It was a sound of pure anguish, echoing from beneath the ice. We froze, every instinct screaming at us to flee, but curiosity anchored us to our spot. The scream was followed by a series of desperate cries, as if someone or something was trying to reach out from the depths. Tuka, ever the skeptic, tried to rationalize it. Probably just an animal caught in the ice, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. But the reality of the situation hit us hard when we noticed footprints appearing on the ice around us. They were unlike any animal we had seen, human-like but distorted, larger, and leading toward the center of the lake. Anna clung to me, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to get out of here," she whispered, her grip tightening. But Mika, driven by a mix of fear and adrenaline, was already moving toward the footprints. "Wait!" I shouted, but it was too late. Mika disappeared into the darkness, his figure swallowed by the night. Panic erupted among us as we realized he was gone, vanished without a trace. The cries intensified, now mingling with what sounded like sorrowful wails emanating from the ice itself. Yuka, usually the most composed, broke down. "We have to find him," he insisted, though his voice quivered. The others nodded, torn between the fear of what we might uncover and the desperation to save our friend. We ventured toward the center of the lake, the footprints guiding our path through the thickening snowstorm that had inexplicably rolled in. The wind whipped around us, stinging our faces and making it nearly impossible to see. The cries grew louder, more heart-wrenching, as if Mika was calling out for help from a place he couldn't reach. As we reached the heart of the lake, the storm reached its peak. Snowflakes swirled around us, obscuring our vision, and the ice beneath our feet began to groan ominously. That's when we saw it, a spectral figure standing on the ice, its form translucent and shimmering with an ethereal light. It was the ghostly apparition of a woman, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. "Help me," she moaned, her voice echoing across the frozen expanse. "He's trapped beneath the ice." Without thinking, Yuka reached out, his hand passing through her incorporeal form. The moment his skin touched the air, a sharp pain shot through his body, and he collapsed, gasping for breath. The apparition moved toward us, her sorrow turning to anger. "You should not have come here," she hissed, her voice now laced with a menacing undertone. "This is a place of eternal winter, a prison for the lost." Terrified, we turned to flee, but the ice beneath us cracked and split, sending shards flying in all directions. The ground beneath us gave way, and we found ourselves plunging into the icy depths of the lake. The cold was unbearable, numbing my limbs and making it difficult to breathe. I struggled to reach the surface, the cries of Mika and the spectral woman fading into the distance as I fought to stay afloat. When I finally broke through the surface, I gasped for air, my body aching from the cold. I dragged myself to the shore, coughing and shivering, the storm beginning to subside as quickly as it had arrived. The others were nowhere to be seen, and the lake was eerily calm, the footprints and spectral figure gone as if they had never existed. Days passed before anyone found us. We were rescued by a search party that had been combing the area after Mika's disappearance. They took us to the nearest town, where we recounted our harrowing experience. The locals listened in silence, their expressions grave and somber. They confirmed the legends we had dismissed as mere folklore. Tales of a cursed lake where the spirits of the wronged lingered, bound by their eternal suffering. Mika was never found, and to this day, his fate remains a mystery. The lake, though visited by fewer people now, still holds an air of dread, a reminder of the night when we challenged the legends and paid the ultimate price. The cries that echoed from beneath the ice are said to still haunt the winter nights. A warning to those who dare to disturb the restless spirits of Lake Lumi. Years have passed since that fateful winter, but the memory remains vivid in my mind. Sometimes, when the snow falls just right and the wind carries a mournful cry, I find myself staring into the frozen expanse, wondering if Mika is still trapped beneath the ice, calling out for salvation that will never come. The legends of Lake Lumi have become a part of who I am, a haunting reminder of the thin line between curiosity and hubris, and the unforgiving nature of the wilderness we so often seek to conquer. Story number 3. The Hunter's Curse. I've always been drawn to the raw, untamed beauty of Alaska, the endless expanse of snow-covered wilderness, the silence that blankets the land, and the thrill of the hunt. It was a place where I felt truly alive. But there are some corners of the world where nature's beauty masks a darker, more unforgiving reality. My story is a testament to that harsh truth. It was the early 1940s when I decided to embark on what I thought would be the hunt of a lifetime. My name is Jack Thompson, a seasoned hunter with a reputation for tracking the most elusive game. The tales of a massive white wolf prowling the Alaskan wilderness had reached my ears, whispered around campfires and shared by locals as both awe-inspiring and cautionary. To me, it was the ultimate challenge. I rented a secluded cabin deep in the heart of the Yukon Territory, a place where the winters were long and merciless, and the nights were dominated by the howling winds and the occasional, spine-chilling cries of unknown creatures. The locals spoke of the white wolf with a mix of reverence and fear, referring to it as the spirit of winter, a guardian of the land, they said, embodying the very essence of the harsh season. Despite their warnings, I was undeterred. The allure of tracking such a magnificent beast was too strong to resist. My wife, Martha, and our 2 children, Ellie and Tommy, reluctantly agreed to join me, though their apprehension was palpable. They respected my passion but couldn't shake the unease that settled over our family as we ventured deeper into the wilderness. The first few weeks were idyllic. We adapted to the rhythm of the wilderness. Days spent trekking through pristine snowdrifts and nights huddled around the fire, sharing stories and dreams. Ellie and Tommy took to the surroundings with a child's curiosity, their laughter echoing through the silent forests. I kept my focus on the hunt, setting traps and scanning the landscape for any sign of the elusive white wolf. But as winter wore on, subtle signs of unease began to surface. It started with the food. Supplies that should have remained fresh began to spoil inexplicably. Bottles of water developed a strange, bitter taste, and canned goods bulged as if something inside was fermenting. I dismissed it as the harsh conditions taking their toll. But Martha noticed the growing tension around the table, the silent dinners filled with unspoken fears. One night, as the wind howled louder than usual, I awoke to the sound of glass shattering. Rushing to the kitchen, I found the windows frozen shut, the ice encasing them in an unbreakable grip. The shards glittered ominously under the flickering light, and I felt a chill that wasn't just from the cold seeping through the walls. Martha and the kids huddled together, their eyes wide with fear. The next morning, the situation worsened. The snow outside was piled high, making it impossible to leave the cabin without risking our lives. Ellie fell ill with a high fever, her breaths shallow and rapid, while Tommy complained of headaches that no amount of rest could alleviate. Desperation set in as we realized that something was terribly wrong. It was then that the howls began, low, mournful cries that echoed through the night, reverberating off the snow-covered trees like the wails of lost souls. At first, I thought it was just the wind playing tricks on my mind, but the sound grew more distinct, more intentional. It was as if the white wolf was trying to communicate, its cries filled with sorrow and warning. I decided to heed the locals' advice. That evening, I gathered whatever firewood I could find and built a protective barrier around the cabin, hoping to ward off whatever spirit haunted these lands. Martha watched me with a mix of worry and resignation, her hands trembling as she clutched Ellie's blanket. As night fell, the howls returned, louder and more aggressive than before. The temperature inside the cabin plummeted, the warmth of our fireplace struggling to keep the chill at bay. I felt a presence outside, a weight pressing against the windows, as if the very essence of winter was intent on breaking through. Desperate to save my family, I ventured outside, armed with nothing but a flashlight and my unwavering determination. The snowstorm raged around me, the blinding white making it nearly impossible to see. Every step was a battle against the wind, my heart pounding with fear and adrenaline. Then, through the swirling snow, I saw it, a colossal figure, its fur white as the snow itself, eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. The white wolf stood before me, its gaze piercing through the storm, filled with a sorrow that spoke of centuries-old grudges and the unforgiving nature of winter. I froze, unable to move, as the spirit let out a mournful howl that seemed to shake the very earth beneath my feet. "Leave this place," it seemed to say, its voice echoing in my mind. "Return what was taken, and find peace." I stood there, torn between my duty to protect my family and the undeniable power of the spirit before me. With a heavy heart, I realized that the hunt had brought nothing but suffering and despair. I had to make amends. Returning to the cabin, I found the door ajar, the wind having breached our defenses. Inside, I saw the extent of the curse, food rotting faster than the cold could preserve, Ellie's condition worsening with each passing hour, and Tommy's pain evident in his weary eyes. I knew what I had to do. Under the pale light of the moon, I prepared to offer what little I had left, a symbol of my respect and repentance. I buried the remains of the white wolf deep in the snow, hoping to honor the spirit and lift the curse that had befallen us. As I completed the ritual, the storm began to abate, the howls fading into the distance as a sense of calm washed over the land. Returning to the cabin, I found that the windows were no longer frozen, the warmth slowly seeping back into our home. Ellie's fever broke, and Tommy's headaches eased, the healing power of forgiveness and respect for the natural world working its magic. The prolonged winter began to thaw, the snow melting away as if it had never been there. The locals later told me that my actions had appeased the spirit of the white wolf, allowing the cycle of winter to continue in its rightful time. I never hunted again. The memory of that cursed winter etched into my soul as a constant reminder of the delicate balance between man and nature. Years have passed since that fateful winter, but the lessons remain as clear as the Alaskan skies. The howls of the white wolf still echo in my mind, a haunting reminder of the night when humanity's arrogance was met with the unforgiving wrath of the wilderness. I often find myself gazing out at the snow-covered landscape, wondering if the spirit still watches over the land, ensuring that its ancient laws are never forgotten. Sometimes, on the coldest nights, I swear I can hear the distant echoes of the white wolf's howl, a spectral reminder that some curses are not meant to be broken, but respected and heeded. The wilderness remains a place of beauty and terror, its secrets guarded by spirits that demand reverence and understanding. And deep within the heart of Alaska, the white wolf waits, a sentinel of the eternal winter, forever a part of the nightmares that haunt those who dare to challenge the natural order. Story number 4. The Haunting of the Snow Queen. I've always believed that some stories are better left untold, locked away in the frozen whispers of time. But curiosity has a way of breaking down even the most formidable barriers. And in 1963, my family and I found ourselves at the center of a tale that would forever chill the marrow in my bones. It was the heart of winter in rural Canada, a place where snow blankets the landscape from late November to early April. Our farmhouse, nestled on the outskirts of a small town, was a haven of warmth and comfort against the relentless cold. My parents, Sarah and Robert, worked tirelessly to maintain our modest home, while my younger sister, Emily, and I spent our days exploring the snowy wilderness that surrounded us. One particularly harsh winter storm hit our area in late January, The winds howled like lost souls, and the snow fell in relentless sheets, burying everything in its path. We were well prepared, stockpiling food and firewood, but nothing could have prepared us for what was to come. After the storm subsided, we ventured outside to assess the damage. The world was transformed into a pristine white wonderland, each tree and fence post encased in ice. It was during one of these post-storm inspections that Emily discovered something peculiar in our backyard. A doll. Unlike any I had ever seen before, the doll was crafted from what appeared to be ice, its porcelain-like skin shimmering under the weak winter sun. It wore a delicate gown that seemed to be made of spun snowflakes, and its eyes were large, dark, and eerily lifelike. Emily, with her endless imagination, immediately named her Snow Queen. First, the doll was a source of fascination and delight. Emily insisted on keeping her by her side, dressing her up and creating elaborate stories about their adventures in the snowy realm. I watched as my sister formed an inexplicable attachment to this frozen figure, her laughter echoing through the house as she played with her new friend. But as the days turned into weeks, subtle changes began to unfold. It started with the windows. Even though we kept the heat cranked up to stave off the chill, the glass began to frost over from the inside, forming intricate patterns that mimicked the delicate lace of the Snow Queen's gown. My parents dismissed it as a quirk of the old farmhouse, but Emily became increasingly unsettled. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard faint giggles echoing through the halls. At first, I dismissed them as the wind playing tricks on my ears, but the sounds grew louder, more distinct. The laughter seemed to emanate from Emily's room, where the Snow Queen sat perched on her bed. I approached cautiously, heart pounding in my chest. "Emily," I called softly, pushing open her door. The room was bathed in a pale blue light, and there, sitting on her bed, was the Snow Queen. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its smile was both beautiful and terrifying. Emily sat beside the doll, her eyes glazed over, lost in a trance-like state. "Isn't she beautiful, Lily?" Emily whispered, her voice hollow. "The Snow Queen will keep us safe." I reached out to take her hand, but she recoiled as if burned. "Don't touch her," she murmured, her voice tinged with fear. "She's watching us." From that night on, the house became a prison of ice and fear. The windows remained perpetually frozen. No matter how much we heated the rooms, scratches marred the wooden floors, deep and deliberate, as if someone or something was clawing their way through the house. The eerie laughter returned every night, growing louder and more menacing, drowning out any semblance of peace. Desperation set in as the manifestations of the Snow Queen's presence intensified. Objects moved on their own. Doors slammed shut without warning, and the air grew colder with each passing day. My parents grew increasingly agitated, their once warm and loving demeanor replaced by exhaustion and fear. Emily, now fully under the Snow Queen's spell, stopped speaking altogether, her only communication through the doll she adored. One frigid evening, as the wind howled outside like a chorus of wailing spirits, I confronted my parents in the living room. "We need to get rid of that doll," I insisted, my voice cracking with emotion. "It's tearing our family apart." Sarah looked up, her eyes red from sleepless nights. "I know, Lily, but where do we even start? It just appeared out of nowhere." Robert, always the practical one, suggested burning it. "Fire can destroy almost anything. If we burn the doll, maybe the curse will lift." Reluctantly, we agreed. On the following morning, armed with torches and determination, we gathered the necessary tools to dispose of the Snow Queen. Emily, still under the doll's influence, resisted fiercely. Her protests were laced with tears and terror, pleading for us to leave her friend alone. As we lit the flames, the Snow Queen seemed to come alive, its eyes blazing with fury. The doll emitted a piercing scream that echoed through the house, freezing us in our tracks. The flames licked at the doll's icy surface, but instead of melting away, it began to grow, expanding in size and darkness. The house groaned and creaked under the weight of the curse, and a blinding snowstorm erupted from within, engulfing us in a whirlwind of ice and despair. In the chaos, the walls seemed to close in, the temperature plummeting to unbearable levels. The laughter turned to shrieks of agony, and the house itself seemed to conspire against us. The storm outside intensified, tearing through the farmhouse with relentless force. My parents fought to keep their footing, their faces twisted in fear and desperation, while Emily clung to the Snow Queen, her cries blending with the storm's fury. Suddenly, a deafening crash shook the house, and the roof caved in, sending us tumbling into the icy abyss below. The world became a blur of white and darkness. The last thing I remember was the Snow Queen's frozen smile as the house was swallowed by the storm. When I awoke, I was outside, the remnants of our farmhouse buried under meters of snow. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silent, desolate landscape. I trudged through the icy wilderness, the memory of that night haunting every step. The townsfolk, upon my return, spoke of the tragedy that had befallen our family. But the true horror of the Snow Queen remained hidden beneath layers of frost and fear. Years have passed since that fateful winter, but the legend of the Snow Queen endures in the whispers of the northern winds. I often find myself staring into the frozen expanse, wondering if the Snow Queen still watches from the shadows, waiting for the next soul to fall under her icy spell. The memory of my family's demise serves as a grim reminder of the dangers that lie hidden in the depths of our own fears, and the thin line that separates warmth from eternal winter. Sometimes, on the coldest nights, I swear I can hear the faint laughter of the Snow Queen, a chilling echo that reminds me of the night when curiosity led to our downfall. The snow continues to fall in the area where our house once stood, an eternal blanket that hides the secrets of a cursed family and the haunting presence of a doll that became a nightmare. Story number 5. Eternal Winter. I've always been fascinated by the macabre tales that linger in the shadows of forgotten places. When I first heard about the eternally frozen village in Siberia, it felt like a story plucked straight from a Stephen King novel, eerily captivating and chilling to the core. Determined to uncover the truth behind the legend, I packed my gear and set off on a journey that would plunge me into a nightmare I could scarcely imagine. The flight to Siberia was grueling, the landscape below me a vast expanse of snow-covered wilderness that seemed to stretch into infinity. As the plane touched down on the desolate runway, a biting cold greeted me, sharper than any winter chill I had ever felt. The small village of Zimnyaya Bereska lay ahead, a ghostly testament to a past shrouded in tragedy and supernatural lore. Upon arrival, the villagers were scarce and reticent, their faces etched with lines of sorrow and fear. They spoke little of the past, casting wary glances whenever the topic of the cursed winter arose. My host, a grizzled old man named Ivan, offered little comfort beyond a warm drink and a place to stay. His eyes, however, betrayed a depth of knowledge that words could not convey. The witch's curse, he began one evening as we sat by the flickering fire, brought nothing but suffering. They say she was wronged by the villagers, and in her rage, she vowed that winter would never leave. I listened intently, my recorder capturing every hushed word. Ivan's stories were fragmented, filled with sorrow and hints of something malevolent that lingered in the frozen air. As the nights grew longer and colder, the village seemed to sink deeper into silence, the oppressive atmosphere thick with unspoken fears. On the fourth night, as a blinding snowstorm raged outside, I decided to explore the remnants of the village. Armed with a flashlight and a sturdy jacket, I trudged through the knee-deep snow, each step crunching ominously in the stillness. The once vibrant homes now stood as frozen monuments, their windows shattered and doors ajar, as if the inhabitants had fled in terror or been seized by the curse itself. I reached the center of the village, where the old church stood, its steeple piercing the gray sky. The air was unnaturally cold here, each breath a visible plume of vapor that dissipated quickly. Inside, The pews were covered in a thick layer of ice, and the altar was adorned with frost-encrusted symbols that sent a shiver down my spine. It was here that Ivan had hinted the witch's spirit might still linger. As I delved deeper into the church, a sense of unease settled over me. The temperature seemed to drop further, my breath shortening as I pressed on. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the empty halls, followed by a distant, sorrowful wail. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled to turn on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. In the far corner of the nave, I saw her, a spectral figure draped in tattered robes, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Her presence was both mesmerizing and terrifying, a haunting embodiment of the curse that had damned the village. I froze, unable to tear my gaze away as she raised her hands, the air around her crackling with icy energy. "You dare to disturb my eternal winter?" Her voice was a hollow echo, reverberating through the cold air. "The snow shall never melt, and the shadows shall never fade." I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The apparition advanced, each step leaving a trail of frost that glistened in the dim light. Memories of the villagers' despair flooded my mind. Families torn apart, lives lost to the relentless winter, and a community consumed by fear and grief, summoning every ounce of courage. I steadied my voice. "I'm here to understand, to tell your story. Let me help break the curse." Her eyes bore into mine, filled with a sorrow that transcended time. "The curse is bound by pain and betrayal. Only forgiveness can thaw the eternal frost." Before I could respond, the ground beneath me began to tremble, ice cracking and shifting as the church seemed to come alive with a frozen fury. I staggered back, the apparition fading into a swirl of snow and shadows. The storm outside intensified, the howling wind mirroring the turmoil within. Desperate to find answers, I sought out the village records in the old library, a place untouched by time and heavily guarded by frost-covered shelves. Dusty tomes and brittle papers chronicled the village's history, the witch's tale entwined with accounts of strange phenomena and unexplained disappearances. One particular journal stood out, its pages brittle and yellowed with age. Written by a woman named Ekaterina, it detailed the witch's sorrowful tale of exile and revenge. Betrayed by those she loved, Ekaterina had harnessed the ancient magic of the mountains, binding the village to an endless winter. Her writings hinted at a ritual that could lift the curse, one that required the forgiveness of the heart and the restoration of trust among the villagers. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I returned to the church, determined to confront the specter and offer a path to redemption. The snowstorm had subsided, leaving behind a serene yet eerie stillness. As I entered the church once more, the apparition awaited, her presence now tinged with a glimmer of hope. "I have the key to breaking your curse," I declared, holding up Ekaterina's journal. "It's a matter of forgiveness and healing the wounds of the past." She regarded me silently, the icy aura around her beginning to wane. "Can you truly forgive what was done? Can you mend what was broken?" I nodded, tears welling in my eyes as I felt the weight of the village's pain. "I can't undo what happened, but I can help ensure it's remembered and never forgotten." A soft light began to emanate from her form, the frost melting away as warmth replaced the chill. "Then let the winter end," she whispered, her voice now gentle. "May the snow cleanse the scars of betrayal." With a final, radiant smile, the apparition dissolved into a cascade of snowflakes that shimmered in the fading light. The church seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the oppressive cold lifting as the first rays of dawn pierced the horizon. As I stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the village. The eternal winter had finally thawed, the snow melting into rivulets that sparkled under the morning light. The villagers, long trapped in their icy prisons, began to stir, their eyes filled with gratitude and newfound hope. I stood there, watching as life returned to Zimnyaya Berezka, the legend of Ekaterina transformed from one of fear to one of redemption. The curse had been broken not by magic, but by the power of understanding and forgiveness. Years have passed since that fateful expedition, but the memory of the eternally frozen village remains vivid in my mind. Sometimes, when the wind howls just right, I can hear Ekaterina's voice carried on the breeze, a reminder that even the deepest winter can yield to the warmth of a compassionate heart. The mountains of Siberia, once a place of eternal frost, now stand as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of forgiveness.